Howard Philip Lovecraft. Chapter 1. The fullness of the moon was enough to fill the eyes with a beauty all its own, and Princess Luna saw it with a mix of disdain and awe. For not only was it her former prison, but also her namesake. These thoughts were soon cast to the void, however, as she began to recall the reason behind her current voyage. Tonight was Nightmare Night. That promise she had made so many years ago to that young foal was something she was not soon to break. As her eyes beheld the view of the land, she was entranced by its twilight beauty, the chariot soaring above the great oceans of green, the hills of stone and earth upon the distance, mere looming Goliaths of their daytime glory, as was the way of the night Luna so cherished. Her mane flowing as the silver streams of starlight they were, her voice rose high above the screaming winds. "Make haste! I do not wish to arrive late for the festivities tonight." The bat-winged Pegasi that drew the chariot answered in unison to their beloved princess's order, voices deep and adherent. "Yes, princess." The pace of the flight began to accelerate, and their celerity was enough to mitigate Luna's desire. Always pleased was the princess at the willingness to serve of the guards who had long ago pledged their fidelity specifically to her in her night. Their bright yellow feline orbs contrasted brightly against the dark colors of their face, coat, and armor, and the darkness of the night only served to accent this quality to the point of them being frightful. However, any who would see them would be accustomed to these late eve rides of Luna when the day marked Nightmare Night. Even the chains that bound the drivers to the chariot shone a bit, but their obsidian bindings reflected only the moon's light, and were not themselves luminescent. She wondered as to whether they ever regretted the change in appearance that had been enacted upon them over the centuries. These thoughts began to displease her, for soon they brought to the surface of her memory the former feelings of hatred towards the world, and how that millennium must have felt to those who ever held the mark of their service to her. The emblem of the eye that they now bore with pride and honor must have at once brought them disgrace and the fear and hatred of others. The scorn they must have felt, and guilt began to once again invade her mind. However, soon there was a relieving tone, for she knew that her sister, Princess Celestia, sovereign of the sun, would have cared for them in her absence. Why was it tonight of all nights that she would think of this? She thought. Soon these thoughts too were cast to the wind as the rooftops of Ponyville began to show themselves, a juxtaposition of regular geometry against the organic and non-Euclidean shapes of the treetops, a smile beginning to form on her lips, and the memories of the ponies who enjoyed her company so began to enter her mind, and shoo away the bleak thoughts of the antedated. Twilight Sparkle was the first in her mind, for she had always held a special place in her thoughts ever since her liberation from nightmares. But the others, Fluttershy, Applejack, Pinkie Pie, Rarity, Rainbow Dash, and Pipsqueak soon followed suit in her mind's eye. Earthfall was soon made, and the high tops of those thatched roofs and the bulbous covering of the patisserie that was Sugar Cube Corner were slightly dulled in the candlelit night that was such a celebration in the lands. As she alofted from her seat upon that sharpened vessel, Blue Eye present on the anterior with pointed outcroppings jutting from the posterior, she gave her guards a bow and said, "You have given unto me a safe and quick journey, and I ask that thou wouldst allow themselves a repose for the night. Be merry, for your service for me is halted in the time being." Her guardians bowed in return, but the leftmost one, a rather surly stallion with a raven-black mane and silver scar running down his left cheek, retorted with a reluctant neigh, saying, "We are first and foremost your servants, great princess, and though it is expected of us to follow you without question, we will remain here and periodically circle town as wards against possible threat to you or your transport. However, should you be in danger, we will be at your side in a moment's time." "Always so protective of your princess, yet I feel there shall be no threat to my being tonight, as it has been every night for the past years." "Yes, my princess, but your safety is above all our first and foremost concern, and this will always be, so we shall remain at our vigil until you bid us to bring you from hence." Luna held herself a bit higher at these sayings, for again this dedication to her did her heart well. Soon she again spoke to those who had done her so great an honor. "If that is what thou wishes, then so shall it be. However, I will have refreshments brought to thee regularly throughout the night, so you may enjoy thine watch to some degree." "Thank you, Princess Luna," spake the other, as bulky as the first, but with mane of deep blue and the slightest signs of wrinkles on either side of his eye. Both bowing in turn, he continued, We take great solace in the commodities that you provide for us so generously. I bid thee farewell, and thank thee for thine constant and unfaltering loyalty. She bowed for yet another time, and again her guards returned the gesture, saying in unison, You do us great honor, princess. We hope the celebrations are to your liking. And with a nod, Luna left them both there, the honorable captains Rampart and Noct. In the past 40 years, they had brought her here and back and held the role of personal guard. Captain Rampart had even suffered that scar in the protection of her during the assault of Nightholm by the changelings so many years prior, a feat that had earned him his rank. Only old Captain Noct showed the signs of aging that would one day even creep onto the face of young Captain Rampart, though his lack of seniority was by no means a lack of prowess. Even their ancient generations had once claimed the same position as they now so hold with pride. As she transversed towards the library where Twilight was waiting her arrival, she looked back once more upon those guards, the thoughts of the oncoming returning once again. She said aloud, although quietly, How much sorrow have I brought unto them and their kin? Suddenly a small pony leapt from the shadows, the visage of a toothed dragon, face red and spouting paper flames fully visible in the sights of Luna. "Princess!" exclaimed the masquerade dragon in a surprisingly squeaky voice. "You're here!" After a moment's hesitation, Luna arrived upon the realization that this individual was the young, at least in respect to Luna, Pipsqueak. "Pipsqueak, it is good to see you again on this glorious night," said she, smiling all the while. Lifting up his mask, Luna was given sight to a young, slender face that held a brown spot over the left eye, and still held that boyish smile that she had seen the first night in Ponyville he had met her. "It's good to see you too, Princess. Twilight's waiting for you at the library." "I was just on my way to see her. Will you accompany me?" "Of course I will." And so the two began to walk, bantering on about the goings-on in Ponyville and what was permitted to be discussed of the courts of Canterlot. The costume he wore was of a red scaly material, almost as fish scales that did well in its convincing of his draconic appearance. Luna, as always, was dressed in her usual attire, with those blue glass hoof coverings and necklace depicting the same image as was to be found in her cutie mark, a black background with an almost gibbous crescent moon. The grass was cool beneath her hooves, and soon she found the conversation at an end, too soon in her mind, for they had arrived at the library. "All right, Princess," spoke Pipsqueak. "I'm going to go and collect candy with Pinky and the others, but I'll see you again when you tell the scary stories." "Yes, of course," replied Luna, and with a nod she watched as he donned his mask and leapt off after Pinkie Pie, who was dressed in an old costume of the ne'er-do-well, and being tailed by many groups of four-legged beasts, goblins, and other things of merrimental fright, as was the custom. Shaking her head in humor, she proceeded towards the library. The orange of the sign that displayed an open tomb would have been dulled by the night, but for the addition of a brightly burning candle allowing its color to bloom as it would never in the presence of the sun. The usual screams and squeals of joy and mirth could be heard from all sides now, and the far-off screams of the latest victims of friendly pranks were received as well, the culprit Rainbow Dash in the most likelihood. The red door of the library, with candle and blaze now as some sort of magic, most likely a minor spell of Twilight's, held a thrumming bass as Luna knocked upon it. From inside she heard a muffled, "Coming," the voice of which could be none other than Twilight Sparkle herself. However, a loud crash was heard subsequently, followed by the sound of an exclamatory "Oof!" Luna's wings splayed open at the current upset, and she nearly called out to Twilight, when the door opened inwardly, and the strangely bearded visage of Twilight appeared. Upon further inspection, she was dressed in an older costume, with floppy and pointed hat, in addition to a coat of many stars and constellations, the one of Starswirl the Bearded, the one she had worn upon Luna's first attendance to Nightmare Night. "Princess Luna, good to see you here." Bowing slightly, her breathing steadily beginning to slow. "Just on time, as always." The scruffy white beard hung upon her face, upturned at the tip, rather loosely, and a small portion of her neck remained uncovered between her chin and the beginning of the prosthetic beard. The head covering she wore was a brimmed night blue hat with a bronze bell that weighed down the tip to give it a bent appearance. The brim, along with a strip above it, was a lighter, more regular blue when in comparison to the majority of the hat, and is adorned with equally spaced bells, identical to that of the one that holds to the tip. Towards the precipice, the images of stars and fat crescent moons can be seen. This keeps into the cape she wears, which is held upon her by a golden link coupled by an azure-colored amulet, with a white frill emanating from beneath it. The following segment of cloth fell to beneath her hooves and dragged slightly upon the ground. In addition to the yellow stars and blue crescents, it began in that midnight blue and, in the following 2 tiers, became visibly lighter until it came to an edge which had reverted to the initial hue, with the inclusion of still more bronze bells. "Star-Swirl the Bearded yet again?" inquired Luna. "You can only have so many ideas," she replied with a hint of humor. "And still no pony knows who I'm dressed as," shaking her head with the mentioning of the recognition of others. Her mane held a moderately purple hue, and the hair that was exposed was a mix of deep sapphire blue, with a streak of brilliant rose juxtaposed next to a thinner line of violet that was of a moderate shade, identical to the irises of her eyes, which currently held the golden reflection of the candle shining nearby. Her coat held a slight outline, as the warm light from within silhouetted her slightly, but the light mulberry color with gray tinge was still as visible as it would have been were this day of typicality. "Come in, Princess. I want to give you a heads up of tonight's schedule. I've got the list all written up." "Of course," voiced Luna as she followed Twilight into the library. The wainscot shelves held their usual tan hue and the multitude of books, each organized accordingly. All held a plethora of different colored bindings. The hallway leading below the library was visible in the back of the bookkeep, and the stairs leading to Twilight's lodgings were present immediately next to said hallway. Images of hearts lined the bottommost step, but the usual center table with carven horse head atop was absent, probably stored away on account of the evening festivities. The purple aura of her magic surrounded her horn as she used the magic to open one of the many drawers that lined the bookshelves. "Might I ask to the location of Spike on this eve?" inquired Luna during this process. "Oh, he's on a mission of peace with the dragons, seeing as how they've been rather bothersome these past few months. Speaking of which," she said as a small notebook with purple aura about it was held suspended in midair near Twilight's head, "Applejack and Rainbow Dash are also on missions for Princess Celestia in the Mild West, for the citizens of Appaloosa and the Buffalo tribes respectively. Even though they've had most of their problems settled, they have their occasional bouts of arguments, and it was rather severe this time around. Anyway," she said, opening up the small notebook, "I don't have you scheduled for your stories until about an hour from now. I wanted to give the young fillies and colts plenty of time to gather candy." Upon each 15-minute increment was a small picture including a small caption, ranging from a setting sun to an image of Luna herself. Underneath her own picture read the words, "Scary Storytellings" by Princess Luna, and she shook her head at the extent that Twilight's organizational skills would take her. Feeling the need to interrupt before she sought to progress, she spoke. "Twilight?" "Yes, Princess?" inquired she, halting her commencement of speech. 40 years have come and gone. I believe that I'm well aware of the schedule that is to be kept tonight." Of course, I was a bit short-sighted." Looking away rather coyly, the bells sewed upon her hat jingling. "It is all right. I'm mainly curious if anything will divulge from the usual pathway of the celebration." Giving herself a moment to ponder, she replied, "Not that I can think of. Being what the night is, we're not really much from the usual, but we do have a new game this year." "Game?" said Luna, a hint of eagerness coupled with interest present in her voice. "Yes. Rainbow Dash was out near Lost Pegasus, and as soon as she saw it, she had to have it here. She was almost heartbroken when she needed to commune with the Buffalo tribe, but duty calls." "What exactly are the particulars of this game?" asked the Lunar Lady. "Well, it's called the Rainbow Tumbler, and it's quite a fantastic piece of craftsmanship." "Please continue," bade Luna, as she allowed the other to leave first from the library in which they had been speaking, and Twilight continued her explanation as the two walked towards the center of town where the merriment was made in the form of activities both solo and multifaceted. An hour given her she meant to spend it having fun and enjoying herself. The obscure surroundings were given a hue of silver by the moon and a touch of Titian by the flames. It was a sight to behold, and a night not to forget. As an hour was beginning to be struck, a small crowd of young fillies and colts had begun to gather in the preparation of a usual event, the telling of frightful fantasies. The scene was set, and from the rooftops one could view the myriad of colors that had come about from this combinational event of multicolored creatures and other unsavory creations for the purpose of fear and mirth, those two opposite emotions that may yet still reside within the mind in tandem. Upon a slightly raised platform was Princess Luna set, legs betwixt her and the wooden floor. She surveyed the crowd with growing apprehension, for she knew all too well the story which they would desire, but her thoughts of the journey afore made her feel as if the retelling would be a bit much on her nerves that had been agitated this season for unknown reasons. However, she could see no cause for not allowing the younglings to hear what they wished, for it was for their sake that she would proclaim these tales. The presence of a rather banded individual was set at the foremost of the crowd, facing towards the onlookers as opposed to the soon-to-be speaker. Said individual kept this striped appearance throughout her, and it was obvious through conjecture that the forefront was the local sage Zecora. As costume, she held a simple shawl over her, giving an eerily hidden appearance in addition to flowing wisps of ebony smoke wafting from her countenance. Her coupleted voice served well for this announcement, as she spoke in her usual tone. "Welcome to you on this night under the moon, and I hope your interests to be given a boon. Tonight on this nightmare night we have prepared quite a special sight, a telling of a terrifying tale that is sure to cause fright in the absence of light. If questions you may have, you must wait until the end for your minds to be sate. And now, without further ado, Princess Luna and I eschew." Towards the halting of her speech, she had begun to withdraw a small bit of dark powder, and, upon completing her announcing, tossed it to the ground, and darkness fell over her exit. The quiet gasps of the younglings were of astoundment and fascination, for that superficially contrasted individual never ceased with amazing feats of the apothecary. Cleverly fleeing, Zecora snuck to the back of the crowd where an anticipatory Twilight was awaiting her. "Good job, Zecora," congratulated Twilight. "You speak as if you had a doubt. I would have thought your position a bit more stout." The bibliophile gave a slight smirk at this comment and shook her head, saying, Of course I had confidence in you. Fret not, my good friend, mirth is the only message I send," interrupted she. "Oh," replied Twilight, giving a grin. "I see that— Oh, she's starting!" A hush began to settle over the crowd as the princess did well to project her voice across the small gathering, well enough that the two whom had been conversing could hear her without strain. She began with a slight and steady tone, allowing for the cognition of those assembled. "Welcome to all who had come to hear my stories on this celebratory night. I do hope that everyone has enjoyed their night so far." A loud exclamatory came in reply, originating at the front from a brightly pink pony in a ne'er-do-well hat, a pile of candy piled in front of her, Pinkie Pie nonetheless. "You bet your hooves I did!" Slight giggles could be heard throughout, as she resumed the devouration of the heap of confectionaries. Luna could not even help herself in a small smile, and brought her hoof up to her mouth to hide a slight chuckle, but the joviality could be heard in her voice when she spoke. "That is good. I'm curious as to the story of which you would have me recant to tantalize your minds and shudder your nerves." There was a slight murmur throughout the younglings, and then a teal-colored filly in garments of an apparent mad scientist, with lab coat and wildly spiked white hair, proclaimed in a soft voice, Could you, tell us about Mr. Lovecraft again, please?" The general consensus of the grouping could be inferred by general noddings and voicings of approval. Surveying the mass of frightfully fastidious faces, she felt certain that the decision was made with the lack of spoken language. "Very well, then, I will tell the tale of the late Mr. Howard Philip Lovecraft." Again the crowd began to shuffle and give off slight soundings of approval, but the overtone of hushing soon quieted this, as all gathered listened intently to hear the story of this confounding cult. Even the older of the group were rapt listeners, and soon nearly all goings-on ceased to be partaken in, save for the wind's whistling and the voice of the princess. "Westward there is a path seldom traveled by pony folk.